Now coming to the stage, Dr. Jonathan Cox, Vice President for the Center for Policy Analysis and Research at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation.
Thank you. Greetings, everybody. My name is Dr. Jonathan Cox, and I'm the Vice President for our Center for Policy Analysis and Research here at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. And it's an honor to welcome each and every one of you to the 53rd Annual Legislative Conference of the CBCF. Now, each year in September, the CBCF convenes people from all around the nation right here in Washington, D.C. to address the most urgent issues facing Black Americans and the global Black community. ALC, as the largest public policy conference focused on Black communities, serves as a space to engage in bold ideas, collaboration, and action. Now, our theme this year, From Vision to Victory, Amplifying Black Voices, is a resounding call to elevate Black voices in every sphere of society. History shows us that when Black Americans are empowered, all of America benefits, whether it's through social and economic opportunity or the protection of civil rights and our democratic ideals. As we approach the end of this significant election year, amplifying our collective voices is more important than ever, and is the only way for us to actually move from vision to victory. Now, at the Center for Policy Analysis and Research, we are dedicated to advancing the CBCF's mission of informing policy and educating the public. Now, through our research and analysis, we strive to impact the social, political, and economic circumstances that shape and uplift Black communities. Now, this session embodies this very commitment. Today, you will hear from dynamic thought leaders, change agents, community members, and practitioners who are working every day to shift policy and transform the world around them. We are deeply grateful for their insights and their ongoing work to create a better future for all. And now I would like to introduce you all to our moderator for today's session, Nakara Campbell-Wallace. Nakara serves currently as the Executive Director of Rolling Sea Action Fund and Let It Resound. She has had a commanding career in campaign finance and strategy for the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, raising millions of dollars in funding between 2015 and 2019, including becoming the first African-American woman to hold the position of Associate Director of Member Engagement and Director of Member Dues. After 3 years at the DCCC, in 2019, Campbell joined the CBC PAC as their first senior campaign and political advisor. Now, please join me in welcoming to the stage Nakara Campbell-Wallace.
Good afternoon, Black people. How are you doing today? What you're going to find out during this panel, I'm deeply unserious, but serious about political engagement. That I am serious about. So without further ado, I'm going to start bringing up our panelists. Once I call you and introduce you, just come on up, y'all. So Ziana Bryant is a racial justice activist, organizer, and social impact strategist who works to amplify and center the voice and power of young people leading for change. In 2016, at the age of 15, she successfully petitioned for the removal of the Robert E. Lee statue and the renaming of the Lee Park in downtown Charlottesville, Virginia. I know, that's right. Give it up. We'd love to see it. In 2019, she was appointed by Virginia Governor Ralph Northam as the youngest member of the Virginia African American Advisory Board. She leads Black Girls Power at the Youth Mentoring Action Network in Upland, California, where she's the architect behind a fellowship that funds and supports Black girl changemakers in the US, the UK, and Canada, because she ain't just here, she worldwide, baby. She's currently a graduate student and recent graduate of the University of Virginia, where she studies African American studies with a focus on Black feminism and the intersection with religion and broader gender politics. She's a Black Southern woman with a personal North Star of centering voices of the most marginalized communities among us. Give it up one more time. Diana Burton, please come up. Born and raised in Jacksonville, Florida, and is a recent graduate of Florida State University with her Bachelor of Arts in Human Rights and Social Justice. Diana, an activist and public servant, passionate about community enhancement, youth civil engagement, mentorship, and advocacy. She's participated in the student government, served as the FSU MPHC vice president, and is a member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority. Okay, I was waiting. I'm waiting. And was elected into the national office, serving as the director of programs for College Democrats of America. She is a White House honoree, TED Talk ex-speaker, President's Volunteer Service Award recipient, and recently was named the 2004 National Action Network's MLK Youth Honoree. She recently interned with the House Energy and Commerce Committee through the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation and is now working in DC and Florida as a policy consultant. Give it one more time. You can sit in the baby. Derek Lewis currently serves as the interim national director of youth in college for the NAACP. Previously, he served as the field manager at the NAACP Youth in College Division. In this role, he served and supported more than 700 NAACP youth and college units actively involved in the fight for civil rights across the country. He brings 10 years of experience in grassroots organizing and training on a state and local level as both a member, leader, and a national staff. Derek has increased unit capacity across the country with 300 newly chartered and reactivated NAACP units during his time in the Youth and College Division. He's also worked on increasing voter registration and turnout for Black youth in campaigns across key issues such as gun violence and police accountability. With his organizing efforts, Derek has his own proclaimed day in Austin, Texas, known as Derek Lewis II Day. In 2019, he was recognized as the Greater Austin Black Chamber of Commerce as the advocate of the year. Derek is from Texas and a proud member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity, Inc. There we go. Y'all gotta show up for your fraternity members and sisters. Trell Williams, the last one joining us on our panel today, is a youth policy consultant and movement building fellow from Child Defense Fund and is an organizer from North Carolina. He's an alumnus of North Carolina A&T State University. There we go. The Center for Third World Organizing Social Movement Apprentice Program. Trell focuses on dismantling oppressive structures and promoting transformative justice through mutual aid, trust, and reconciliation. His work spans prison abolishment, youth mental health well-being, and housing insecurity and education access. He's driven by a quote, "Our dreams must be as big as the problems that lay before us," and is sustained through this consistent practice of dreaming with his community. So that's our full panel. No, thank you. All right, guys. Check. All right. I want to thank all of you guys in your own right, because you guys are a testament to when we invest in Black youth, we win. And when we invest in Black power, we also win. So thank you guys for all the work that you guys do. So in recent years, we have seen a surge in civic engagement among young Black people. What do you think accounts for this surge? And do you think we can sustain it? The floor is anyone's.
Mic check. Can you ask a question one more time for me?
For sure. So in recent years, we've seen a surge in Black youth participation in civic engagement. What do we think accounts for this surge, and do you think it's sustainable for the future?
Yeah. So one, thank you for allowing us to be here and to share insight and knowledge, expertise. I think to your question is one, like when we think about youth and how in the recent surge, right? In my mind, let me know if I'm wrong. In my mind, I believe that youth have always been involved in numbers, but with that, we have seen the surge of increase in voter participation. Right, in 2020, we seen that I think youth turnout was about like 48%. In 2016, 2020, it went up to about 63%. Right, the reason being is because while we're seeing a larger number of youth voters turning out, is because now the issues that we're talking about are not just subjected just to adults, but also to youth now. And that's the reality that we're facing in right now, is that the issues that are now affecting adults are also affecting youth. We talk about economics, we talk about housing, we talk about gun violence, we talk about education. That's definitely youth. But now what we do is that what we're seeing is that there is an opportunity that we have with youth and we talk about engaging with them and talking to them about the issues that matter most to them. And the issues that we've been talking about has resulted to high turnout in the polls. Now, how do we sustain that, right? Sustaining that now comes into voting is the first aspect, but now how are we now using our messaging from influence to getting people to turn out, but influence now to include them into policy, right? Meeting with our elected officials. And oftentimes when we're talking about the election, it's being talked about on a high scale level. We're talking about the presidential election. And that's great. It's important for us to do that. But there is also so much power in our state and local legislator and engagement in that areas. And what we have seen over the past few years is also changes on the state and local level that may not have been affected everywhere, even though that on a national discourse we've seen affirmative action overturned. Roe versus Wade on the federal level, but on different states and cities are also operating in different ways. And the reason why is because, again, we have folks who are engaging. I know that Ms. Bryan can speak to this as well in your experience. Yana, you can speak to this as well, who are engaging on the local level and making that change happen instantly.
Yeah, I would like to say that in addition to any quantitative data we have, there's always a qualitative narrative. And so it's important for us to think about, we had 2013 when Trayvon Martin was murdered, right? We also have 2020 when young people were taken to the streets. And so I think in those moments, we had important conversations by youth leaders about how policy and voting at the ballot box is, one tool that we have in our toolkit, but it must be coupled with on the ground organizing. And so kind of the angle that I'm going to bring to this conversation is that in rural areas such as Charlottesville, Virginia, where we're seeing Charlottesville be a political moment, a hashtag, there were young people who were on the front line to petition to take down statues, who were running for office, who were doing all of those things. And that is important to keep people engaged because, like you said, yes, people turn out to vote once or twice, but what keeps them coming is those people who are on the ground, who's having those conversations, who's making sure that they're coming to public meetings, who's making sure that they understand that all politics are also local. So I think that as we talk about like what has driven youth turnout up, I think we have to talk about those political moments. So we have to talk about the Sandra Bland's, the Breonna Taylor's, like if we don't have that conversation, then we're not really understanding what is making people angry enough to get to the polls, because it has to be something, right? You can say, oh, it's your political obligation to vote. We can say, oh, your parents are voting, but like it has to be something that gets them in that car, gets them to the polling location, and causes them to go cast a ballot and then pay attention to what the election results are.
Studies suggest that grassroots advocating campaigns can be more effective than traditional lobbying efforts. What makes youth-led grassroots movements particularly powerful in influencing policymakers, and how can we make this effectiveness be maintained and scaled? So I'm gonna throw it to you first.
First, thank you all for having me. I would like to bring greetings from all the fierce child advocates at the Children's Defense Fund, working tirelessly to make sure every child grows up with hope, dignity, and joy. I come from Greensboro, North Carolina. Bringing greetings from the beloved Community Center as well. And can you read the question again one more time?
For sure. How can grassroots advocacy campaigns be more or can be more effective than traditional lobbying? So what makes these grassroots movements more particularly powerful in influencing policymakers? And how can this effectiveness be scaled to larger dynamics?
Thank you for that question. So in recent years, some of the work we've done as youth policy consultants at the Children's Defense Fund is lift up this title of impacted people, credible messengers. We actually first got that introduced into federal legislation in the past 2 years on some campaigns we worked on out of Texas. But I think that really centers the significance of people who are impacted by the issues being experts on their life, right? We want to be more increasingly consider experience as expertise. And how can we make this spread out more? I would say things we're already doing, lifting up young people who are beginning to first get engaged in activism, and organizing and create more political homes. So I want to lift up, as well as on the last question, the Movement for Black Lives. That's created a huge network of organizations and just opportunities for students and youth to engage in the movement in a more personal way.
Anybody else have anything to add there? The mic is on.
Oh, hey y'all, can y'all hear me? Okay. For starters, also thank you for having me here. Really excited and just a little nervous to speak in front of y'all. But on the notion of grassroots organizing, I'm 21. And I think when it comes to targeting my peers or turning out the youth vote, the reason we're so impactful in the work that we do, whether it's College Democrats or Spears, because we go to places that electeds aren't. You know, it's nothing for me to go into these barbershops, these hair salons, my community, and speak to the people because I am the people. Even with recent initiatives, we're talking about doing voter registration in the club because you have to go to where the people are. You have to meet people with where they are. And you can't really serve the community without knowing the community. You can't address a problem without seeing the problem and speaking to the problem. So meeting these people who are being impacted by these issues, or meeting with people who can speak to, you know, the severity of what's happening, I think is ultimately how we solve anything. And with us on here being on this stage, I think us not being willing to face the problem head on and going into these communities, I think that's the difference.
Look, we can blow hookah smoke and register to vote. I know that's right.
I got you.
Go ahead, Derek.
Yeah. When I say people, you say power people. Ah, you got me messed up. Try it again. When I say people, you say power people. People. So when we talk about people power, that is exactly what grassroots organizing is, right? And grassroots organizing, what we all understand, is relational. It's based off relationships. It's us actually talking to the people that have the problems that we're advocating for. We ain't coming up with theories, right? We're actually talking to those who are impacted by the pain and the policy, and those are the stories, those are the experiences that we can bring to our elected officials. So now when we're speaking, we're not just speaking based off of what we heard or what we thought. We actually have real experiences. And the piece about grassroots organizing is that everybody is involved in it, right? I know people may say that, oh, I'm not political. Your life is political, whether you believe it or not, right? Water is political. The air is political. All that matters. So now it's what your job is, what all of our job is how do we get our neighbors, how do we get our friends, how do we get our family to understand what is at stake when it comes to our quality of life, but also understand that they have a role and their voices can also be amplified, right? Everybody has a role in the movement. Everybody. You and your mama, right? But when you think about it, right, we talk about voting, yes, but what we're talking about is like, how do we now use this to where we can use it to influence policy? And I think that for us, we will do a disservice if we're not allowing folks or creating folks or giving people organizing skills to where they can actually impact policy. So what does that mean? How do you now share information? And now the information that you share, we now have a trusted messenger, right? How are we now sharing information, educating folks to where now it's not just the information is just with me, it's also with other people. So the information that you all have in your privileged seats sitting in DC, CBC, LLC, right? Recognize it. How does this now get to somebody who is in a rural area, in the community that you talked about, a family member that you know is in the criminal justice system? Now use your own privilege to share that information with them. And we're making advocates, organizers all over the world, but most importantly, those who are more issue focused. The issues is what's going to help us to continue to influence policy, but most importantly, us telling our story and sharing our experiences.
Can I add something? Thank you. So I actually think that the reason why so many people think that they're not into politics or that politics isn't for them is because they don't understand our livelihoods being connected, right? None of us is free until all of us are free. And that's a common thing that we say. It's, you know, something that we say often and we chant it and we put it on posters. But we have to understand that in order for me to have my best life, to live my best life, it's connected to everyone on this stage and everyone in this room. And so once we settle ourselves in that kind of political ideology, I think we move forward. Additionally, the part that a lot of people don't want to say is that young people are ready to work, but do we have a seat at the table though?
Yep, let's talk about it.
And that's the part, right? Like, young people want to go on social media, we want to utilize lives, we want to go on Twitter, we want to use Threads, Instagram, all the things, but is that welcome? Right? Like, we say we want young people at the table and we want to hear young people, but what about the young people who don't wear business attire? What about the young people who are not enrolled in university, don't have any college credentials? Like, I think that that's the part right there. So often, even when we talk about young people in political spaces, there is this vision of what we want young people to look like, how we want them to speak, and who we want their associations to actually be, their friends, what organizations they're a part of. And so I think if we don't have, a real opening and welcome space for everyone to come into it, then we will always see these kind of class divisions that we've always seen. But I think young people are saying right now, we want something new. And I just hope that as we try to foster these intergenerational spaces and have these conversations, that young people are actually accepted as they are, not just where they are, but as they are, to come into the space and actually have influence.
And as we actually talk about social media and online advocacy and the way that it's being used and galvanized, I mean, movements can spread and you can be somewhere tomorrow. I remember when Freddie Gray happened in Baltimore. Like, I knew exactly where to go, where to volunteer, where to get the food for the kids, all of those things. So how has that transformed the way that Black youth engage in civic activism? And what are the benefits and the downsides of shifting to a digital space?
I think for me, when I think of social media, and while it's not tangible, like I can't reach out and touch it, it is so powerful. Um, there's a phrase that I like to use because, like all of us, we've been in organizing for some time. And I just shared that I'm 21. So this is the first presidential election that I can actually vote in.
Yeah, that's exciting.
But I've been doing the work for years, and I think it's important to answer that question. You have to recognize that young people, more specifically young Black people, they have a voice before they have a vote. So giving them that platform, giving them those tools to be able to speak out about anything and everything that they care about, that's powerful. That those type of resources just at the tip of your fingertips, it's powerful, but it can also be dangerous. I think when we talk about things that are going on overseas, or when we talk about things going on in other communities or places I've never been to, people, my mom more specifically, is always asking me, why do I care about what's happening overseas? Why do I care about communities that have nothing to do with me? And it's mostly because I'm seeing it every single day. I open up my feed, and even if I'm trying to just laugh or see a meme or see a reel, it's always something about what's happening in Palestine. It's always something about what's happening in Flint, Michigan, in Alabama, in Mississippi. And I'm from the South, I'm from Florida. So I'm used to not having those resources. I'm used to not having our stories being told. Well, social media has shown us that young Black people have something to say. Social media has shown us that the South has something to say. And even if we do not have, because I know I don't have the financial means to immediately create some change, but I can build, and I can, we can gather and we can start talking about it, and we can make sure that this just isn't trending. I know in 2020, we all saw those Black squares, I think with digital activism, there's a fine line, because if it's not followed up with action, it becomes performative. So how can we make sure that we're keeping, we're standing on business, and that we're keeping the pressure on these people's necks to let them know that we are voters, and even before we were voters, we are people, and we have a voice, and this is what we care about. So do something about it, or you will lose your job.
Anybody else want to touch on social media and the downfalls or positives of social media?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and add on to both. So I'll start with the downfalls so we can end on a positive note. One of the downfalls I feel is that we haven't found a way to really translate the community we've built online into real world community, right? And they always say early 20s, I'm 24, is like a really hard time to go out and make friends. Can anybody in the audience attest to early 20s being a hard time to make friends? Yeah, so that's one of the downfalls. But the upsides are access to information, like my peers and colleagues already spoke on. So I'm an abolitionist, and Ruth Wilson Gilmore, she often says abolition is a place. And if you're just coming into the movement, you probably feel like we have to build that place out of nothing. But with access to social media, I'm from North Carolina, I can hear about projects and see about projects happening in San Francisco, how they're fighting gentrification over there, or how, and like you said, in Flint, Michigan, they're fighting a water crisis, or amazing communities and people's projects happening in Florida. The social media world gives us access to those spaces and know that we can, make them happen where we are in our homes.
And just to touch on social media a little bit, I think the downside, I would love to hear your standpoint on and what responsibility each of us and each of us in this room have is misinformation and disinformation online, because that is a lot. I mean, we saw yesterday the former president tell us about cats and dogs. That was unhinged. Very, and illegal aliens getting transgender surgery in prison. There's a lot of things that spew out of his mouth and then are now translated online by people who just don't know. So I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on that as well before we move on.
Yeah, like I think to what everybody said, like social media exposes us to worlds, communities, or different ideas and strategies that we may have even seen, heard of, etc. But on the downfall, like you just said, misinformation, disinformation is huge on social media. I remember at one point, there was a post. We have our moments, y'all. It's the issue that came up, and I seen a post. I don't know if it was Spiritual World or somebody, and it posted something like "Last register to vote by October 7th." It's last day to register to vote. It's not true, right? It's not true. Why? Because every state gets to regulate what that looks like. It's based off of whatever that state may be. If it's 30 days before the election, 28, 26, 25. Virginia has same day voter registration. So it's not true. Who you're getting information from matter. Who says it matters. Who even shares it even more matters. Because now what you're doing, what we have to recognize, as all of us have a role, as I said before, is that fact check the information before you share it, right? Oftentimes what people can do easily is put a logo. They can put it in white font, post it, maybe add a little red at the bottom to make it seem like it's real. I added a logo of a news outlet and it's official just because of that. And that's dangerous within itself, right? So making sure that we are fact checking information when it comes to headlines. Read the headlines as well, right? Read the articles. Some of the articles are op-eds, so now it's not an actual formal article that's coming from a reliable source. So making sure that we look at that and also think about, yes, we have to check it, but also think about how AI is incorporated into all this as well. We can think about how videos are being recreated. We can use voices, and I can use a voiceover from this, or just put a script and I can put it in the voice of your favorite influencers or celebrity. That is misinformation and disinformation, and we have to be the ones to, one, call it out when we see it, but also how do we rectify that and share the correct information so that people are actually informed. Because what the fact of the matter is that people are being led so much by misinformation. It's crazy. You talk about the cats and dogs. That was all that I seen last night on Instagram. Was that the only thing that we heard last night?
No.
Right? But because people are continuing to repeat it and share it time after time, you're gonna start to believe it. So we have to make sure that, one, as organizers and as we are sharing information, that we're sharing accurate information, we're doing our data check, and we're also making sure that we can find reliable resources. This even goes to news outlets, from CNN to Fox News. You'll get a very different view depending on what the news outlet is. There's a very neutral news outlet. I think the most neutral news outlet, I don't know if it's ABC or, is that again? MSNBC, right? But we know that CNN they'll lean more towards the left. Fox News, they'll lean towards the right. So making sure where you're getting your information from and not being influenced by other factors as well.
And just really quick before someone jumps in, deepfakes is very serious, and I want everyone to know, like, this is a legal court case that I'm paying my lawyers a lot to fight against right now, that they can use anybody's voice to call you for political ads. And this is something we are literally fighting every day. So please make sure that you are checking who is calling you, what they say at the end, because they can put Joe Biden's voice, Kamala Harris's voice, James E. Clyburn's voice, anybody's voice, Jay-Z, Beyonce, it doesn't matter. Deep fakes is just AI and how it shows up in campaign spaces. So please just be vigilant this cycle. And I know that's a lot to put on y'all, but including the voices of your relatives. Everybody can get it.
Additionally, I think that we talked about some of the evils that social media can come with, but I want to talk about the positives and what we can do on a practical level. So, what we can do is when we want people to get into the streets or we want them to show up to public meetings, we can be clear in what we're asking them to do, right? A call to action must be clear, right? If we're just educating you, we're giving you articles and we're giving you all the information, that's important, right? You have to have all of the information in order to act. But as someone who's been doing mutual aid work since 2020 and who has raised around $270,000 for like housing issues, I know that telling people these are 3 steps that you can do today is how you get people to really engage, right? Because people feel hopeless. They turn on the news, they see all of the things, they're depressed, and then they have anxiety, and then they're just like, what can I do about this world right now? Where do I start? So I think giving very clear action steps is one way that we can use social media to get people off of line and into the streets or offline and into their public meetings. And so I think making sure that we influencers, activists, people with platforms have access to our elected officials too is important. One thing that's been done really well by our current presidential administration is having influencers at the White House, having people with influence in those spaces so that they can take it back to their bases. Because unfortunately, in this world, a lot of people are not craving community, they're craving fans. And so if that's what they want, if they want fans, let's at least hope that they're giving the proper information to their fans and getting their fans to move to action. So I just want to say to anyone out there who's like, oh my gosh, deep fakes, oh my gosh, AI, now there are all these things that I have to be worried about. Think about how you can use your Instagram stories, your Facebook, whatever you're on, to say, hey, y'all, there's all these bad things happening, but here's one thing that you can do today. It'll take 5 minutes and you can have a huge impact by doing that one simple step.
Yeah, and that's the plus, right? You talk about now how do we expand advocacy, and advocacy can be easy, right? Oftentimes we'll talk about signing petitions or how to make a phone call. There are now tools that have been advanced, and I know a lot of different organizations are using that makes advocacy easier, and social media is definitely that platform. If you have that influence, if you have the follow, I always talk about organizing in general. When you think about organizing, it's about critical mass. How can you get the critical mass of your community to take action? Just like with social media, how can you get the critical mass of your followers to take action by putting a link in your bio? If that's a video, like you just said, under a minute, and I'm giving you a quick PSA. What's the problem? Here's my solution. I'm going to give you an axe, and then here's the action that you can take simply. So us also thinking about in our advocacy spaces, thinking about how we go from grassroots organizing advocacy to digital organizing and in advocacy. So the lane is there, but we all have to do this in community together. And as Dee said earlier, you have to go from not just doing it on social media, but have the follow-up that actually happens in person with that tangible outcome.
Um, I think on the note of misinformation and how to combat it, I heard somebody earlier talk about, not on this panel, but I heard somebody earlier talk about like digital literacy, and y'all, that's reading comprehension. That's being able to think critically. So I think when we're talking about equipping the next generation to how to combat that, that's making sure that we're keeping these babies in school. That's making sure that we're telling them to pick up a book that they can still read and learn and write on their own, because there are going to be so many tools and things that's going to be against them. And then on the flip side of that, when it comes to your social media and how to make sure you're getting active or accurate information, make sure that you're following credible sources. There is Spiritual World, there is Neighborhood Talk, there is Shade Room, but there are also, there's NPR, there's CNN, there's Politico, there's Washington Post, there's other type of news sources that you can follow so that your feed just isn't these other sources. And then lastly, there are also filters and settings that you could put on your Instagram that will mark it if it is AI, or that will mark it if it is false news. But I think there were new rules passed, so you have to now turn those settings off yourself. Turn them on yourself, but they are all on there, and you can Google it on how to turn them on. So yeah.
What is the role? We're talking a lot about youth. I want to nail it and center it on Black women for a second. So what is the role, do you think, Black girls and young women driving civic engagement and social change? What's the unique challenges they may face? What are the opportunities they may have? And I'm going to turn to my 2 lovely Black queens at the end.
I think the role of Black women is everything. No, I'm so serious. I think we do everything, and I think the world is constantly asking us to save them, especially when it's not our fault we ended up here in the first place. However, with as gracious and as intelligent and as beautiful as we are, I think we should keep giving because, that's what life is about. It's about reaching out that helping hand. So I think when it comes to what do we need to do and the opportunities, we need to rest. Rest can be just as revolutionary and just as liberating, and you genuinely cannot keep going if you are not taking care of yourself. And I'm sure my mom is watching somewhere and she's probably like, I just told her this and she did not listen. And you know what? I didn't listen at all because rest also in turn looks different for everybody. As long as you are prioritizing self-care, whatever that is for you, if it's a shopping spree, if it's getting your lashes done, if it's making sure your hair is together, making sure you got them shoes you've been looking at for too long, you finally got that new Telfeezy, whatever it needs to be, take care of yourself and feed you because nobody else is going to. I'm constantly asking to eat. I'm constantly asking to serve. So I can't be mad when my plate is full. That's not how I can operate. So I have to delegate. I have to keep pushing through. But I stay on top of it by keeping my lashes done, keeping my hair together. Y'all see this purple? I just bought it just for y'all to making sure that I have that together. So taking time to do the things that I care about because there is no liberation without fun. And I can't heal you without healing me. So I think our role with doing everything needs to be uplifting ourselves and creating space for ourselves because we are constantly creating space for everybody else and saving everybody else. And if we're saving everybody, nobody's coming to save us. So making sure that we are taking care of ourselves.
Nailed it. So I think Black women taught us a long time ago that it's not just individual though. We need community. And so we talk about we need to rest. Well, how am I going to rest if I don't know who's going to show up in my place, right? So who is actually the community? Right. Fannie Lou Hamer didn't say she was sick and tired of being sick and tired because she needed to go take a nap. She was tired because she was a dark-skinned Black woman in the South, in Mississippi, trying to lead for change, trying to get Black people out to vote, trying to lead initiatives on the ground. And her counterparts were not supporting her and uplifting her voice. And that's the part that is a little unpopular to talk about. But Black women would love to take a step back. But who is going to show up when we're not around is the main question. And who is, period, okay. And also, who's going to make sure that Black women are believed, protected, cited in the rooms that they're not in? In Charlottesville, I had my own experience where I have seen how Black women have been stepped over. Their work has been quickly consulted, but they are not even given the recognition or the ownership over the work that they do. And so that's the part that Ella Baker also would tell us about, right? Because Ella Baker led all of that college organizing work, right? She was leading in the Freedom Ride. She was leading in SNCC. So where was Ella Baker's credit when we think about how Black women contributed to the civil rights movement? It wasn't until much, much later. And so that's discouraging for Black women and Black girls. How do we tell Black girls, hey, I know that your mom had to deal with all this violence in these spaces. I know that your grandmother had to deal with this, but we need you to keep going. That's not encouraging and it's not promising and it leads to burnout. So when we want to talk about rest, when we want to talk about rejuvenation, we need organizations, we need community praxis work. We need collective care for Black women to be able to do that. And so at the Youth Mentoring Action Network, I lead a fellowship where we fund Black girl organizers and change makers from all over the United States, Canada, and the UK. And we give them $10,000. We give them 2 retreats of rest over a 15-month time period. And our goal is so that they come, they enjoy a pool, they enjoy a resort, and they're told, like, yes, you need to rest, but also, what does it mean to reflect on who you are outside of the work that you produce? Black women, we are somebody outside of what we do for other people.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
Black women, we have a name, we have hobbies, we have interests, we have things that we like. I heard you talk about the Telfeezis. I got about 3 of them. I love them. They're the best.
About 7. It's actually
Okay.
embarrassing. Some Brandon
Okay.
Blackwoods too. My God, today.
Yes, the Scythe store, protect Black women. We love those bags. But we like flowers too. We have favorite TV shows. We have interests. And so beyond the blazer, beyond the positions that we hold in the leadership that we have, we are whole people. And I need us to remember that, because Black women deserve to be seen as whole people, as humans with feelings and emotions and lives. And so, yes, we need to continue going. We need to keep pushing. We need to keep sacrificing. But a challenge to everyone in the room. If you are not a Black woman, imagine just asking a Black woman, like, what do you need today? How are you? Checking in with a Black woman, I think it would go a long, long way. And so I just talked about calls to action. That's my call to action for everyone in this room. Like, ask a Black woman how she's doing, and don't just, if she says, I'm good, I'm okay, ask her a follow-up question, because she's more than likely not telling you the whole truth. Okay?
I want to reiterate that point that everybody in this room, if you are my Black people in the room, you are not tied to your labor. You are more than your labor and what you produce in its proximity to whiteness. I just want everybody to remember that. Okay?
In addition, I think everybody in this panel and probably everybody in this room can attest to, the reason why we have like CBCF in the first place, and the reason we have CBC is because we are entering spaces that were not made for us but built by us. And because of that, that does something to you. When I was an intern on the Hill, I'm very aware of the halls I'm walking. The majority of the people and the elected officials, or even some of the staffers, don't even believe I should be breathing the same air as them. So what am I doing to protect myself as I enter those spaces? Because I don't walk around with the entourage. I don't walk around with security. So being mindful and being aware of your surroundings. And I like to say, don't go to places you're not invited to, but we don't have, or welcome to, but we don't have that luxury in this work. They don't want us there, which is why we need to be there. So what are we doing to, I guess, offset that? And I don't know what everybody's religion is or what you got to do, but protecting your energy. And, setting yourself emotionally. I recently was just told to, before my feet touch the ground, set my intention for the day. And recently I decided my intention is to be happy. And so within being happy, I believe being happy and wanting to be a liberator don't really go hand in hand. However, I'm going to continue this cheerful personality. I'm going to continue to be happy because I have the ability to fight. And so setting myself emotionally, it's really hard sometimes with the stuff that they said in the debate last night and the stuff that they say about us, but being intentional with how I feel and being intentional to what I'm going to allow to have power over me, because there's work to do. And within that, I guess my call to action is for all the Black women in the room, give yourself 5 minutes a day. Turn your phone on D&D, tell those kids to leave you alone, tell that boy to leave you alone, whatever it gotta be, 5 minutes a day, and set your intention and decide how you're gonna conquer today. Because even if you just have one win, that's all you need. Symbolic power is a precursor to physical power. And if you can conquer yourself, conquer your emotions, conquer you, then you can conquer the world. So.
And I would be remiss not to direct my next question to my Black men in the same vein. So, Black men, we've seen the polls and honestly in the stats, and I don't put too much stock in that because 8 to 10% ain't the problem of why we had the president we just had. But what are some ways that we can activate young Black men to stay engaged in the political systems and make sure that they know that when they do engage, these systems do work for them?
Yeah, I'll go real quick. So we think about engagement of young Black men into this political advocacy, civic engagement space. One, we have to be as authentic as possible with engaging Black men. A lot of Black men don't have suits. Can we come into a place where we're not having suits? So one, that is a whole disconnect. young black men do not feel engaged, or they may not feel like they have the words to articulate or even engage into the conversation. We have to figure out ways that where we can meet black men where they are. And 9 times out of 10, if we're talking about meeting black people where they are, we have to think about, I'm thinking outside of the college campuses. I'm thinking, where can we actually get to those who have just a high school diploma, right? Those who may have went from not going to choosing to do higher education, but now want to do trade. Those who are working as middle class individuals to working to provide a better life. Most men are focused on how can they be a leader or striving to be a leader as they are matriculating into their young adult lives. So one, again, we have to think about how are we going out to the hood, where are we having those conversations at in the hood, in those areas. I think it's much larger than a barbershop talk. We have to get down to the nitty gritty, right? Having those conversations to see what are the issues that they actually care about and bringing that into them. Now, how do we bring that to them is a number of different things. We have to think about different programs, incentives that can be done to engage black men specifically, but also what I'm also hearing from the black women, we talk about how we form community around this, right? A lot of black men may do this in small communities and not in large communities together, but I do think that there is a space that we can both share as far as black men and black women. What I'm hearing for the black women, I feel like I kind of have to let some stuff out off your chest, and that's okay. That's okay. But what I'm also hear and receive what you said is that also, like, how are black men not just advocating for themselves but for the family? For the family does also make sure that we're also advocating for women. If that's my partner, if that's gonna be my future daughter, if that's my niece, if that's my cousin, because we wouldn't be here without black women, right? So thank you. Hold on. Right, but when we talk about black men specifically, again, we have to make sure that we are consistently engaging, having conversations with them. I haven't seen consistent engagement with black men as much as I've seen it with black women. So we have to think about how do we now bring that space and create spaces for black men to continue to engage in and feel comfortable. And oftentimes it may be done in untraditional ways. But again, when we think about how do we organize our community, when I think about organizing, again, is focused on how do we get the critical mass of our specific target audience to move, right? And again, that can be done on a number of different interests, but I think about we have to understand what men want from what they want from political side, yes, but also feeding the interest of what men actually like to do and feed into that a little bit more as well.
That was really great, Derek. So you really hit all the points. I want to add on briefly to what is it that black men really want, right? So we're not going to be unengaged black men the way we engage just all young children or adults, but through their priorities like your credit. Right now at the Beloved Community Center, we're hosting some credit classes. We're bringing in people to first meet their need and then bring them into the political process of meeting other people's needs. That's how you involve people in organizing. The same thing happens with access to housing is another big thing that black men in particularly have a really hard time with. We actually don't have any rent control in North Carolina. So no, they don't want to stop on the street and listen to your survey or interview your questions. They're really interested in like, what are you going to do about this specific issue? So I think if we could do a better job of clearly outlining how the ballot and how just the movement landscape in general connects to their personal deficits in their life, then we'll bring a lot more black men into the movement at large.
And I also would love to highlight, especially when we're talking about black men, there was a research, I think it might have been Pew, where black men are the most involved fathers by any race. And so shout out to my black fathers. So a lot of what we do to at Rolling Sea and Let It Resound is making sure we're engaging black men with their children, because everybody wants their children to feel safe. At the end of the day, we want our kids not to be killed at school. We want them to have a good education. We want to take our family on vacation every now and then. And black men need to feel secure, and they also need to have purpose. All men do, but in particularly, I believe black men in particular. So before, if anybody wants to comment on that point, before I say anything.
I wanted to briefly add what you were just saying. We need more safe spaces in general for the black men to talk about stuff like self-care, things like healing, intergenerational trauma and bonds. Yeah, and I want to lift up the work of Black Men Build. Who's heard of Black Men Build? Who's ever seen a wartime newspaper? Yeah, there's amazing work going around the country. So I guess, in that light, we could do a better job of uplifting the work that Black men are already doing and really meeting that their authentic selves, like some of my peers have lifted up already.
I
And
want
I
to read.
want to shout out Win with Black Men because y'all really answered the call for VP Harris. So thank you.
Yeah, and I think it's also that, like, again, I think what you just said is that, like, when Black men are engaged, we are doing the work, but also that there are still spaces created for us that are safe spaces, that are just for men, because sometimes we just need man talk. And man talks where we can address a number of different issues of what it means to reclaim our community when it comes to gun violence, right? Reclaim ourselves when it comes to our mental health, right? Right, and also talk about what does it mean for us to also lead the way and chart what the future looks like. One, I want to continue. One, I want to give love to every Black man that's in this building right now, but also to empower you all to continue to do the work that you all do. Oftentimes, when I see Black men in this political organizing spaces, sometimes it's in small circles or they're by themselves. So I want to make sure that if you are a Black man in here, that you at least get 3 other brothers' contact information where you can start to build community. Because we always talk about this, and y'all notice with every conference that you all go to, you go to the conference, you have the vibes, and that's cool. You may have a few connects, but like, be very intentional about building the connections and community with Black men, even if it's just like, oh, I want to call and just have a small conversation. I want to share this thought with you. I have an idea, or I want to work on something, right? Making sure that you have that community and being open to sharing this with your brother and your counterpart in the movement. We have to be able to be open with each other and have safe spaces too.
And I do want to remind us that these two, this movement for Black women and this movement for Black men, do not happen separately. They are combined, they are intertwined. And so, again, our liberation is contingent upon the other groups. So, I want to remind us that when the most marginalized demographic is supported, everyone does well. That's statistically proven. So, whether we're thinking about queer Black people, whether we're thinking about trans Black people in particular, whether we're thinking about low-income Black men, or whether we're thinking about low-income Black women or low-income Black mothers, when the people who are furthest on the fringes are well supported, everyone does well. So it doesn't have to be a competition, right? As we support Black women, we are supporting Black men naturally. As we support Black men with their mental health, we are supporting Black women. So as we connect with each other, I also want to encourage us to connect with, for Black women to connect with Black men, and likewise, because if we don't do that, we're always going to have these separate spaces. We're always going to have these separate questions and separate parts of the panel. But when we actually work together, we get more integration and we get more done overall.
I love it. I love it. We always need to have a mindset of abundance because scarcity is a capitalist idea. So I want to leave us with something and then maybe take a question. What's one thing you would leave or say to any Black youth who might want to be engaged in political activism, or maybe standing on like that precipice of like, I want to do it. What should I do?
Do it. Do it, but don't do it alone. There's always community in this work. Oftentimes, when I first got into organizing, it's like, oh, I have this good idea. I want to do this. And it's like, I would keep it to myself because of the lack of, I don't want anybody to poke holes in my project and my art. I may not be an artist, but I'm still sensitive about my stuff, right? But it is the power of, if you want to be into the space is for you. But I will also say, find your community in this space. The community in this space is what's going to keep you in this throughout the long haul, because you can do this organizing work and you can be great. You can be a badass organizer. Go ahead and do that. But if you do this by yourself, the reality is you will eventually burn out. So what I'm saying is that you do not have to be the head honcho all the time. You do not have to be the front leader. You don't have to be the person that's speaking all the time. But as long as you are adding value into the space, value can be you leading to your skill set. You might look, I don't understand none of this policy stuff. Like, I don't understand the language. I don't understand none of that. But like, maybe you have a great asset in communications. How does that communications now add into the movement to where we're now still influencing the same thing, right? Maybe it's not communications. Maybe it's something else, but the skill set has room for you in the movement. But you have to lean into it. And you also have to find a community that is for you. If that's you becoming a member of whatever organization that it may be. If you's like, look, I'm not with the membership stuff, but maybe I'm with some of these folks that's here really doing the stuff at my local level, that's even better too. But doing it in community, because in unity we find our strength. And then once we're doing things together, as you just said, Ms. Bryant, right? Doing it together, that's when we'll actually get towards what liberation is. Because if we're doing this just for self, doing it just for community, not doing it in community that is inclusive of all aspects of being Black, right? If you're queer, like you just said, or cisgender, whatever that may be, or identifies whatever else, that is what it takes. But you have to be the one to take that first step. The first step is believing yourself that yes, you can do it. I would encourage you to find community while doing it so you're not doing by yourself and you can learn from others. I will always say that if you are in this space, as far as political organizing, influence policy, that you are always a student. You're always a student. You will continue to learn day in and day out, no matter what rooms you may be. It's a different experience, different conversation, and a different angle that can be used towards how can we get towards our end goal. So do it, just don't do it alone.
Anyone else?
Yes. Find a political home. Find yourself a movement home. Get some movement elders, like Derek already shared. Get peers, your movement friends, your comrades, and have a good idea of what it is that you want. I lift up the question Howard Thurman asked: what is it that you want? Really, you have to have a good picture of the world you like to live in, so you know what steps need to be taken to get there. You don't want to just be out here organizing, spinning your wheels, recreating the wheel, going from march to march, just not knowing your way. But have a really good idea of the path that you want to take. And then take a landscape analysis of the social movement structure in your state, your city, your country, and see where it is that you fit. Where do you see your skill set being most effective and impactful? Like Derek mentioned, your tangible skills, communications, or maybe you're a really great community builder, you're a great mobilizer. Dr. King, he could always mobilize a bunch of people, right? Or you're a great organizer like Ella Baker. You have to, even once you find a scale that you want to work at, whether national or local, then you have to find out what area you want to work in. Do you want to be the speech maker? Do you want to be mostly behind the scenes? Do you want to be bringing in the communities that have been traditionally excluded, right? And in our generation, we have a very unique work when it comes to bringing in communities that have been traditionally excluded.
Yeah. I want to lift up the points that my brothers brought forth. You have to show up, you have to know what you want to do or what your skill set is and contribute that to the movement. But the most important thing that I found to be so important is to do your research and do your reading. There's nothing more powerful than a young person who comes into the room and knows exactly what they're talking about, right? And I don't mean you have to have all the answers, but know the facts. Have a couple of stats in your pocket, because what I've learned is that sometimes young people are underestimated as far as what we actually know. And so when we come into the space and we have done our I think we're so powerful, because then we have a different angle to the problem that's not just based on emotions or lived experience. While lived experience is very important, but it's also important to know other people's lived experiences. It's also important to know what the elders have to say, what they've been through, the past, the history. All of those things are so important to know. And just as a young Black person in this country, no one can take your education away from you. No one can take your knowledge away from you. And that's what makes you powerful. And that's what makes you a threat to so many people who want us to be silent, who want us to be complacent, and who do not want us to show up in spaces such as these. So when you step out, if you know your information, you're already fighting the good fight, because so many people don't even want you to get that far.
Nakar, we have one final question from the audience, and I
All
think
right.
it's a good place to end. How do you connect with Black leaders from older generations who might think differently of what showing up as a Black Gen Z leader looks like?
Can you repeat it one more time for us?
How do you connect with Black leaders from older generations, maybe seasoned, who think
Yes, they're seasoned.
differently of what showing up as a Black Gen Z leader looks like?
I think that's actually perfect, because that kind of goes into my question for people who want to get involved. In addition to being a young person who knows their information, being the most powerful in the room, I think you have to know yourself. I'm a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, so dealing with older leaders or older soul wars, I think there's always that challenge of knowing the now, knowing the current issues, and how to activate and connect with my peers versus how I think we would traditionally go about things. I think that starts off with knowing myself, especially when we're doing like, and this goes into all spaces. If it's Greek, if it's SGA, if it's these fellowships, even if it's your job, there's been a lot of conversations about the new business casual or the new business attire. And while there still are like the slacks and things. I personally, I like big lashes, y'all. I like boho in my hair. I like my hair down. It's not always gonna be pushed back. So finding who I am and then making it work. You know what I mean? Because we all have to conform in some way, shape, or form, but that doesn't mean lose myself. And that doesn't mean change my message, and that doesn't mean change my beliefs. So I think when it comes to getting involved in these spaces, the point I was gonna make is I was gonna say finding a mentor at first, but how could you possibly find a mentor to help you when you don't know what you're looking for? When you don't know yourself. So be grounded in who you are and don't let anybody change you. And then within that, when you take on these problems head on, or when you're on these panels with people who are amazing like these other panelists, stay true to you. And that doesn't mean stay in your lane because, if we're all vessels of change, that means we can go anywhere. But stay grounded in the sense of you are who you are. I am my mother's child. I am a Floridian through and through. I am from Jacksonville, Florida. I am a graduate of Florida State. I know those pillars of my life, those accomplishments, but then who is Deanna outside of the blazer? Knowing that will in turn help you solve those issues, will in turn help you get involved in organizing.
Thank you for that. That's perfect. So I want to thank all of you in this room for showing up. One, taking the time to listen to youth voices if you are not amongst our youth pool, because we all have something to say. And at one point, our seasoned folks were the ones starting the trouble. So remember where y'all were doing at them Jew joints, okay? My grandpa used to talk about them joints. Stop. Remember who you are. And with that, I'm gonna let you guys enjoy your CBC week. Be safe, be healthy, take them immunity shots, and be blessed and stay black. Thank y'all.